So we make sure we get it all on the record. It's going to be a lot of really great information. So it is going to be recorded. It'll be posted in Basecamp so you can access it later. Feel free to take notes, write down your questions. There will be a time to ask some questions at the end. So excited with that. I will let Leonard start this party.
Great. Thank you, Emily. It's great to see everybody here. And I'm really honored to be able to share some experience that we've had around the topic today is around alumni volunteers. And I wanted to start out. So I'm going to share a lot of information. You'll have to listen fast, but I'm glad it's going to be recorded. And at the end, I'm going to put my number in the chat. I'm happy to talk with anyone one-on-one about our experience and help support you doing this. And hopefully some of the information here would also be helpful for you, maybe to share with your compliance people, your CEOs, or whoever that, in support of your using alumni volunteer services. So I think to start off, I'll start off, I got sober at Betty Ford Center, and I won't spend a lot of time on that, but I went through there and I had a relapse for 7 weeks, and then I got sober one night, and I've been sober since May 22nd, 1983. And during that time, I lived close by there. So I lived nearby, and when I was going to my aftercare, even though I was still drinking, I stopped in I saw a sign on the cafeteria door that says alumni meeting. And I said, well, I'll just stop in here and this will count as one of my AA meetings for the week. And I sat in the back of the hall, and people were confused and trying to organize themselves. Somebody says, hey, we need to elect officers, right? Everybody's got to elect officers. And somebody pointed to the back of the room because I asked a couple of questions and then nominated me to be president of their alumni association. It's a fluke or a divine guidance, any way you look at it. So I ended up getting sober May 22nd, and that was a Saturday night. And then Sunday morning, they had planned this picnic where they were going to all the alumni get together, because we're real big on picnics. So I said, I'll go up there. So I went up there and I got elected by my peers to be the president of the Betty Ford Alumni Association. Now, that doesn't have anything to do with me and my credibility. It's a God deal. But I think, oh my God, I'm 1 day sober. And we were told what to do, and I followed directions. We were supposed to take meetings to patients on Friday night, and we would find speakers. 1, 2, if people were lonely on Sunday afternoon, they could ask for us to come over and we could talk to them. Number 3, they said every Friday afternoon at 10:30, there are some, it's a discharge meeting. We want one of you all to show up over there. Had a little put together group of about 10 or 12 people and exchange phone numbers. So if they want to call somebody when they get home that's an alumni, we can do that. And that's what started in 1983. Betty Ford was only open about 5 or 6 months at that time. So the reason I mentioned, so I for a year and 9 months, that's what we did. We helped with alumni weekends. We helped with everything they told us to do. So the reason I mentioned that is I had 1 day sober, and they put me into service, and the rest of us only counted sobriety in days and weeks. And we were service, and it helped us stay sober. And I wouldn't be here today without that. So sometimes we have to kind of dispel this myth that, well, somebody's got to have 6 months or a year. And there's a place for that, right? So fast forward about 20 years later, Mrs. Ford, she was highly revered. She was getting older. She says, my greatest legacy is going to be the alumni of Betty Ford Center. And we want to have a very dynamic alumni support services to help them stay sober when they get home. And I was privileged to get the call, and because they, for whatever reason, and God put me there. And we had 2 or 3 chapter groups where people would go home and they would meet weekly, and but there wasn't a lot. It just a few places like LA and New York. So what I want to talk about are about 3 dimensions of what we did for the next 10 years. It may sound like a lot, but when I speak of this, I want you to think of, in your program, if you had 3 areas or cities that had high density alumni, how could you just go into one place and replicate this the first year? So what we did, I was just trying to figure out what was next. We didn't really have email. We had a few emails, but we just didn't have anything virtual. So I would travel around like Southern California. That's where half the alumni were. And I would meet people. Then we started having a breakfast on Saturday mornings at 10 o'clock. We would send mail out, or we'd call people, or the few that had emails at the time, and invite them to a breakfast. So we'd have 5 to 12 people for breakfast, $20 a piece. It wasn't much money. And there are 3 things that happened in that breakfast. We'd start off by saying, why don't you take 3 to 5 minutes and share about your experience since you left the program? People love to share that. And then inevitably, the people crying, weeping, and they connect with each other's heart. And then, we have breakfast, and I kind of talk about our intention to build a group here where people can have support from one another. And the Betty Ford Center would support that. And the last thing we would do when we were having coffee before we left, it says, who wants to do this again? Everybody raises their hand, and we say, what day of the week, what time of day, and what frequency. And they would determine that. There was a special way we did it, and I'm happy to share it with you. So it doesn't get too unruly. And they would say, okay, well, then that means that the Tuesday, 2 weeks from now, you're going to meet. We didn't let them off the hook. We're not going to think about it. And we say, okay, then we find out I look around and say, who feels like they have it really together, and who's willing to be of service and make this happen. A couple of hands are raised, and we ask those people then to find a church or a meeting hall or somewhere, their house or whatever, that this group can convene. Now, this is a really important point, is these groups were autonomous. They took on the shape and form of a 12-step meeting. The only difference was they said, we are a group of men and women whose sobriety started at the XYZ treatment program. And then you follow the format. The reason that we do that is because it's safe for a new alumni to come out to have a similar experience in their home as they did in their treatment. So that's how we started these alumni chapters. So you can do that. And we stay close with them. And, we stay close with those people who would volunteer. And then, so I'll come back to that. So that's how we started the chapters. And then there's a volunteer component, which I'll come back to later. Now, there's 2 dimensions to volunteerism. And one of them I call close proximity. Like in the desert of Betty Ford Center, probably over time, there were 400 or 500 alumni that lived there. So the alumni that come on campus, it's a higher responsibility and takes more, it just takes more attention. So we started creating opportunities for people to be of service to the alumni or to the patients. And I'll give you an example of how this works. So on Friday night, we would have a panel. One person had a 6-month commitment to lead the panel, and they would find somebody every week that would come in and share about their first 90 days of sobriety. So everybody take a half-hour break. Then the men would break into a meeting, and somebody had a 6-month commitment to do that, and then they would find a speaker. And while they're doing that, the women would do the same thing. So on Friday night alone, there is an opportunity for 7 service commitments. On Saturday, 2 alumni would come in and lead the patients in a circle and read the Living Sober group. So we'd find opportunities for alumni to come in and help the alumni stay sober, and it helped the patients because they can relate well to people who are newly sober in year 2, 5, 10 years. And I counted up that over a month's period of time, there were probably over 30 possibilities for people to be of service and to show up. It helps them stay sober, right? And builds this incredible community. So that's the close proximity piece. Now, what I was talking about, these alumni chapter groups where we would go out, that's Betty Ford had people all over the United States and Canada. And then in Southern California, we had about 50%. So you have to look at your geography in terms of where your demographic is coming from for, to where you want to really focus your alumni effort. So the next dimension would be alumni volunteers. I get kind of emotional about it. I remember two board members sat with me one day and I said, man, we got 50,000 people that have touched base here. How are you going to reach them all? They were walking out of the room. They turned around and they laughed. They said, you'll find people to help you. And I go, holy camoly, how's that going to happen? A few weeks later, we had our 20th anniversary and they scripted me and set me up in front of about 800 people who'd come back. We'd have 800 to 1,200 people who'd come back every year for celebrate. And right after the dinner was over, Laura, who's here, she's going to talk in a few minutes, came up and says, can I help? I said, well, here's one. The first year we had 12 people and we'd find them when we had breakfast. You just have breakfast, let people talk about themselves, love them, right? So Laura was my first year we had 12. Next year we had 18. I said, God, I can't do more than this. Then 30, then it was 40 or 50, and it peaked out at 100 volunteers all across North America doing just this format. And so what we found out, if I just had one volunteer in LA or one in Seattle, that it wasn't so easy. And I never anytime we found an alumni volunteer, we would put 2 or more in the area. LA was big, so we had 8 volunteers that worked together. You form a community. Orange County had 3, New York had 3 or 4. So what these volunteers would do, we call them regional alumni volunteers. We couldn't be any more creative than that. You know, they call them RAVs. And their job was is kind of shepherd the chapter meeting. You know, a chapter meeting, which is again an autonomous group. It just needs some support from the alumni staff. Doesn't need a lot from the actual program. Their job is to maybe, you know, they have different forms, but they're pretty much the same as a 12-step meeting. And people have commitments there, service commitments. Somebody's going to come and unlock the door. Somebody's going to straighten a chair. Somebody's going to bring iced tea. Somebody's going to bring donuts. You know, so their job is help make sure that people had service commitments and build the bond of a community. Secondly, alumni contacts. When we have people that are designated at a high level of service, the alumni staff, they want to call somebody, they would meet them in the first 24, 48 hours at coffee. Some people would meet them at the airport, take it for coffee and be curious, get to know them and make sure they go to the chapter meeting and stay connected. People will do this. People don't believe it, but they'll do it because they, you know, if they're deep in their sobriety, the more of service they become, the more profound, you know, this whole network becomes. So the other thing, those are the 2 key things, chapter meeting and contact. Then the secondary stuff, which is also important, is people would typically have a couple of potlucks every year. The program doesn't have to spend a penny. Everybody brings hamburgers, potato salad to the park. Christmas, they'll bring cake and cookies and they'll have a holiday party at somebody's house. It's real simple. People love doing it. And then the educational programs, sometimes the program would send out a spiritual, you know, have a day retreat. We had a back to basics retreat. We had all kinds of retreats and finding local, pardon me for the background noise, but then they'd find local recovery events and shepherd this. So these became more than just a chapter meeting or a volunteer. They became recovery communities. And you know, I'm talking what we did over a 10-year period. So this group of volunteers, a couple of things about that. We would gather together twice a year. Most of them were in Southern California, so we would meet offsite from the program, and people would come together Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we'd have a chapter meeting. We would live what we preached and what we did in the world. And then we'd get close, just like TPAS. You've been to TPAS or you haven't, you're in for a big treat because we get knee to knee and answer questions, become very personal and create vulnerability and intimacy within this group, and they couldn't wait to be together. And then we would have people sharing their experience and best practices, what they're doing at home, what's working, what's not, just like we do at TPAS. And then, you know, we have dinners together and, you know, have an educational seminar. One of the counselors would come speak. And then on Sunday, we have a barbecue. If we were in LA or Orange County or San Diego or someplace, we would invite the entire network of alumni to come together for this. So we really created a scenario where people can live and practice this. I'm hesitant to talk about the magnitude of it because I don't want to scare anybody off. I'll tell you, I'm going to give you my phone number and we can just start with one group. These are volunteers, but we paid them a certain way. Betty Ford was known back in the day where they'd have these 5-day, really intense workshops. They would cover relationships, they would cover codependency, relapse prevention, grief recovery. Some people were certified to do grief recovery work. It's a 4 or 5 day intensive. So we would provide them, some people would pay for this, right? And we would just insert the volunteers that wanted to come for their own personal recovery enrichment. And I think it was a great way to pay folks. It seemed like we got a lot of good feedback from that. So those are the things that volunteers did. It grew over time. And we just find one place and a few things to do, it can grow. We just have to pay attention. We had the luxury of me being able to go and visit and encourage and support and motivate people. So that is a lot of information, close proximity, what we did in the world. We'll talk about one community to start with for y'all, and then a volunteer group. The most we had at one time was 100 people, over a period of time, 140. And because we were like family and there was an 85% recovery rate continuous over that period of time because people showed up at service. It's real simple. The program, 12-step program, it's connection, being of service, helping other alcoholics. We just applied it in a different way. And so the last thing I'll say is I'm going to ask a couple people to speak who actually live this, right? And then we'll have some Q&A, and I'm willing to stay on afterwards. People want to stay. So you think, okay, what about liability? What about HIPAA laws? And, what about the CEOs? Because people have different variations of ideas about how this works. We did not have to worry too much about HIPAA laws back in the day. What we were told is that these volunteers could have, this is a long time ago, it's probably changed, they could have access to contact information for alumni if they signed a release form and we trained them. And every 6 months, we'd have a training of sorts. So we had these, so people could make phone calls and they can, do emails. And we had a very specific way to do that to make sure everything was protected. I doubt that can happen today. When people would come into the program on these service commitments at night, there was the reception desk. There was a form that says, you have to protect confidentiality and HIPAA, blah, 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 and sign it and agree. So we did get to that point, but you have to check with your compliance people. My experience with treatment over the years is there's competing interests between compliance and being of service, because compliance is we're going to protect this program no matter what. And our services, we got to get out here and connect. So it's just a natural, necessary occurrence. But I believe the more that we can communicate how this works in the autonomy of chapter groups, we can help educate folks and have a bit of latitude that will help us. But people ask, well, what do you do? So you just got to check with I told you about all I know. Check with your compliance people and how do you make sure everything's protected. Now, the other part is the CEOs. And, CEOs that I know are busy, man, looking at the finances, the budget and quality of care and all this. And sometimes alumni is an afterthought. That is the benefit of that is that's how TPAS came to be, which I'll talk about briefly. And I'm happy. So we did a white paper 3 or 4 years ago. We talked to 20 prominent programs that were active with TPAS. And I interviewed them personally, CEOs, clinical directors, and prolific alumni services folks. And what we found is with 20 participants that 30 up to maybe 50% of all referrals come from alumni. Then the second data point, and we'll give this to anybody that wants it, and I'm happy to talk to CEOs about it. This is called return on investment for alumni. The average cost of admissions through the sales, marketing, business development, conferences and all that, is $3,000 minimum up to $5,000 per admission. If you take alumni services, the cost of alumni services, say it's 50,000, 60,000, and it's 2/3 of the admissions, the actual cost averaged was between $700 to $1,100 per admission. So there's a business case to be able to invest at least your gas to go to breakfast and breakfast for people. So that hopefully that's helpful. And I know I've said a lot, and I'm going to shut up here in a minute. Having done this for about 10 years with Betty Ford Center, people start calling and saying, well, what do we do? What do we do? Lori Obernaur called, and she was brand new, and she called people saying, what are we going to do? Who's doing what? So Lori and I talked, and I had my gig had ended with Betty Ford, and I was living in Fort Worth, and my buddy Mac, who's here, so let's bring some people in here. We'll pay their way. We'll put them up in a hotel or lodging, and get everybody together, start talking. So we invited about 15 people. We're going to pay their way down and give them a place to stay, feed them. And we had 7 people that volunteered. Some people wouldn't let the people come. They didn't know what was up. This is the state of the world at the time, I guess, about people not knowing what alumni is or what we were up to. So 7 people came down, and some stayed at Mac's house. And Pam, who's here, who's new back on the board, was one of those people. Now Mac's here, and he doesn't maybe realize what this hosting did, but Mac was one of these volunteers. So once we started, everybody started scratching on paper. I said, we got to have a whole lot of people sharing their best practices. And that was 10 years ago, last fall. So right now, I think we're at 75 members, and we get together and we share these best practices twice a year. And we do it on Zoom. We're doing it right now. And, we're making a huge difference in the industry. When I was doing this stuff, started in 2001, there was no recovery coach, no peer specialist. We just created what we thought made sense. But now this whole effort of recovery coaching and I swear to God, TPAS has been a conduit for a lot of that, peer specialists and all kinds of cool stuff. So I'm going to ask Mac to share about his experience being a volunteer in a minute. And the other person we have here is Laura Jones. Laura was the first one to volunteer in 2000, whatever it was, one. So with that, Mac, tell us what it's been like for you to be a RAV.
Thanks, Leonard. I'm Mac Tull, and my sober journey began at the Betty Ford Center on September the 21st of 1995, and I'm forever grateful for that. Leonard and I were at a meeting last week, and it was the topic was carrying the message, and I had to share about my experience. Coming out of the Betty Ford Center, I was told to go home and go to 90 meetings in 90 days and get a home group and get a sponsor and work the steps. And you know what? I didn't do that. I went home and I went to a meeting every now and then, and I just was miserable. And one day Leonard showed up in a meeting, and he asked, he came over after the meeting and asked me if I would consider helping with a project that they had going back at the center. And he said, it requires a year of sobriety and somebody that has a home group and somebody that's worked the steps and has a sponsor and sponsored people. And I said, well, Leonard, I've been sober a year, but I don't qualify for any of that. And, Leonard mentioned, just loving people into service a minute ago, and that's exactly what he did. And so I met all those requirements and got into service as an alumni volunteer. And I think that's when my recovery really began. just last week I was contacted by the center about someone who has come out of treatment and is back in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So that alumni contact business still goes on, and it's still a really great part of my recovery is to be able to be of service that way. The alumni chapter meetings we had here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, gosh, they've ranged from having over 200 people at them all the way down to I drove one time from west of Fort Worth to downtown Dallas, which is a long way. It's 60, 70 miles, and to a chapter meeting, and no one came. I went there and sat there by myself, and then, so it varies widely about what happens. But one of those meetings when I was sitting there all by myself, and one guy walked in about 20 minutes late, and I was just getting ready to walk out the door, and he was thinking about going to drink that night, and he had gotten a email about a chapter meeting and decided to go. And he shared with me later that that's what turned his whole deal around. So I know that just suiting up and showing up makes a big difference to people. Leonard also mentioned the benefits to the alumni volunteers that in the form of all of the programs that we got to be involved in, so that we could better carry the message and better share about the programs available at the Betty Ford Center was amazing. I've been through about every program there is, family program, grief recovery, back to basics, couples programs, children's programs, the whole deal. Selfishly, the benefits of all this were immense to myself, but it enabled me to carry the message in a much more efficient way to people coming out of treatment and coming back to our area. So, as Leonard alluded to, Mrs. Ford's vision was that great outcomes could come from treatment if we had a strong alumni program, and I believe that's truly the case. So it's a huge part of my recovery. It continues to be, and I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to have been involved and to have gotten to know people clear across the country with just this similar experience. So I really appreciate the ability to be here and to share. Thanks, Leonard.
Thank you, Mac. We've come a long way since your living room in fall of 2011. So,
oh yeah,
that's great. All right, so I think I mentioned we had 43 support groups over those years, and we did it with the volunteers in about 20 some different communities, and one of those was in Calgary. So I'd like to next ask Laura Jones to share about her experience, however she wants to share it. Laura was the first volunteer. She's still here today, volunteering. So go for it, Laura.
Thanks, Leonard. My name's Laura. I'm an alcoholic. And my sobriety date is November 20th, 1996. And, I'm very emotional. As Leonard said, as soon as he shared what he was looking to do, I went up and I said, I want to help. I'm in Canada and I don't know how many there are up here, but I want to help, because giving back to the Betty Ford Center was so vitally important to me. I had a new lease on life as a result of going through treatment. And I'd been very active in AA for a number of years by that point in time. I was of service within my AA home group. I had a good group of friends. But when this opportunity presented itself, I thought, I want to do more. I was already an alumni contact for people returning to Calgary from the Betty Ford Center. Again, back in the day before all the HIPAA laws changed things, you know, I'd get a phone call from Alumni Services and they'd say, we've got a gal who's here from Calgary and this is her name. And so I'd write a note, I'd send her a card and I'd say, welcome. We can't wait to have you back in Calgary. We can't wait to have you back and be a part of our group. And I look forward to talking to you on the phone before you return. And I look forward to having coffee with you as soon as you get back, or, you know, as soon as possible once you get back. So I can share about different meetings in Calgary. So I can share about our alumni group in Calgary. And, you know, we built a small core group of people in Calgary as the result of that. And it was so very exciting to have that like-minded group of people who had that same bond, who had those similar experiences that were different from just being a part of within their AA community or NA or whatever the case may have been. As Leonard shared, you know, we did have spiritual care come from the desert to spend a day with us. We had, you know, Leonard came to Calgary on a few occasions. We also had people from Alumni Services and our philanthropy department as well. You know, Calgary has had we've had some generous donors over the years. I've had the good fortune to be involved in you know, our philanthropy council and we had Hazelton, well, it's now Hazelton Betty Ford Society of Canada. And, you know, again, people who are wanting to give back in different ways, and some of it is monetary and some of it's just by showing up and being a part of this group of recovery. And again, it's the people in Calgary would tell you that they know that we're there for each other all the time. We can go, you know, for periods of time without seeing each other, but that phone call is all it takes. We had an alumni gathering a couple of weeks ago at one of our alums' houses, and you know, people who hadn't been involved for years showed up, and it was again that building connection and that heartfelt love that we have for each other. And as Matt shared, I too had tremendous benefit from some of the programming from the grief recovery method training that I received, that I was able to take back to my community and to take some of our alums through the grief recovery method and a difference it made in their lives and in their recovery. As well as, you know, I went through the family program. Again, long before Zoom existed, we used to have a web chat on Wednesday nights. And there were a lot of family members who participated in the web chat. And so I was a regular at the web chat, and I wanted to have a better understanding of what it was like for a family member. And I got that by going through the family program. So I was able to utilize that knowledge, again, to be supportive to family members who were coming, you know, back with their loved ones and not knowing how to handle situations and focusing on the addict or the alcoholic instead of their own recovery. The richness is just so much. And, you know, I look at Mac and I look at Leonard and, you know, it's been a while since we've seen each other in person. And I think about the intimacy we've shared over the years and the close connection. I think of Leonard's great leadership abilities. And when we gathered as RAVs and talked about best practices and talked about what we were doing and what was working and what wasn't, and the suggestions we got, and I just think about the way Leonard showed up in love and service, and he taught me about love and service. And my life is just, and my recovery has been enriched so much because of that. And I, you know, look forward to perhaps, you know, new opportunities that may present in my world that will allow me to take what I have learned and share what I have learned to help other organizations do something similar. I mean, the benefit of being an active member of an alumni group is exponential. And I'm so thankful to be a part of all of it. And for the many years that Betty Ford had the RV groups was just highlights of my recovery. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. So appreciate, thanks, Mac, thanks, Laura. And I think at this point, we just open it up for questions or comments. And Emily, I don't know, do you people raise their hand? Is that how we do this?
Yeah, thank you, Mac and Laura. You guys are amazing. So if you wanted to like physically raise your hand, or if you have the ability to do it, if you go into participants next to your name, you can do a little hand raise. Questions, comments. Jump on in, folks. Now's your time.
Yeah, I'll jump in if I can.
Hi, Darren.
Hi. So I had a question on, well, two questions. One, how long did you see participants participate in chapter groups? Like, what was the average attendance? I mean, did they jump into a chapter meeting and then just continue, and they're continuing to meet, or did you see it kind of meet a need for the first couple of years, couple of months as they're coming out of the center, or was it once they joined, did they kind of continue on? One, and then two, as you built these chapter meetings, I know the volunteers came from alumni who had been alumni for a while, but then did you see it mostly build from new alumni, those just coming out of the center, more so than those that have been out for a while?
Well, that's a really great question. There's always a core group. There are people who started chapter meetings in 2002 that still send emails out in LA that they have been going on all this time, right? And there's a core group of people. Some people may have been there, volunteers, the high-level volunteers or otherwise, for all that time. It's probably just about like any AA meeting.
Mm-hmm.
The retention part of it is about, make sure everybody has service commitments until the glue sticks, right? And then everybody falls in love. I mean, that's what it's about, right?
Yeah.
In terms of coming together, we love being with each other. So there's not a specific formula, but there's a core group that sticks with the volunteer group, the large volunteer group, as well as the chapter meetings, and that it has a life of its own, right? So I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but people come and go, but there's a core group that stands. And we don't want this just to be their only support service, right? So we want them to come to this meeting, then we encourage them to get out to other chapter meeting or other 12-step groups or whatever group they want to join.
Okay, great. And then as you built those chapter groups, do they come mostly from clients that just left the program initially?
Yes, initially, no, because Betty Ford opened in 1983. And we started doing this extensive effort in 2001, and it didn't start picking up steam until about 2002 or 3. So there were people we would reach back, whoever's on the mailing list, the contact list, and there were people who've been around a long time that they were really solid. I think Laura said she got sober in 96, and 5 years later she's connected, and she's still connected.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's there's not a real formula for this. The formula is how we bring people together to create intimacy and vulnerability and connectedness. It's just a practice of the principles of the program in this situation. But great question, Darren. Thanks.
Thank you.
I see Ben had his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Leonard, so much. I learned so much from you. And I wanted to kind of first of all, say thank you to Leonard, thank you to Laura, and thank you to Mac. That was awesome. And I've heard this stuff at TPAS before, but hearing it again, I was like, oh, I forgot that. And I never heard that before. And if you guys haven't been to a TPAS, you should go. I started going. So Darren, I just wanted to kind of tail on to you. I took over our alumni program in 2014. I work at Talbot, and I took it over from a lady who had been doing it since the 90s, and stuff had kind of gone defunct, and she really hadn't been keeping up with the chapter groups. They were kind of doing the same thing. And I was really scared, like a couple of people touched on like who's going to show up, like, and then people started showing up, dude. And like, I just got back from a weekend. We went to an alumni retreat weekend in Destin, Florida. And I sent out this email, not knowing who I was going to reach, because our email database goes back to like the early 90s. And this retired pediatrician from Chattanooga that came through in 1992 showed up. And he was kind of like a display at a historical museum. Like everybody wanted to come up to him and touch him and like, holy shit, you were there in 92. Oh my God, like this is crazy. And then we also had people that had just got out. So dude, don't let these doubts get in your brain and go, okay, I have to do it the right way. I think like Leonard said, and Laura and Mac, like if you have love and you have service, that's all you need. And if you show up, and I know it sounds corny, but I get this from Leonard, so it's really Leonard being corny, is the right people show up. Whoever's supposed to be there will be there. And just start with those people and they'll be your core. And I literally, everything I do with our alumni today, I kind of like started with a clean slate, and I'm just like, I'm going to just do what Leonard and everybody else tells me to do. And it's been wildly successful. And now that COVID's kind of like, people are starting to get over it, I'm starting to travel again. And I just got back from Birmingham and met with a bunch of alumni in Birmingham. And I'm trying to do exactly what Leonard and everybody's trying to teach us to do. And the crazy thing is, you guys, despite my rumbling, stumbling, and fumbling and being my own worst enemy, the principles behind all this stuff work, and they work great. So just wanted to say that to Darren. And again, thanks you guys. I love y'all. Hopefully I'm going to see you guys soon. It'd be awesome. And if you haven't registered, you should go. That's it.
Thanks, Ben. I do want to say one thing, I'm a bit unorthodox and some around too much businessy stuff. And, people want to measure metrics on everything. A few times people say, well, what do the numbers look like? And I said, it's not about numbers. When you have one person that like I think Mac or somebody mentioned it, when one person shows up and they were going to go out and drink that night, or somebody just lost their child from an OD. We invited family members too. It's nothing exclusive. It's very inclusive. So it's the power of just one person here, one person there, and then it all adds up to be very huge over time. So I just want to add on to that, Ben. It sounds like that's what you're up to as well. Who else?
Max physically raising his hand.
Who is?
Mac.
Mac, you want to talk?
Oh, unmute.
Can you unmute him?
I can only ask to unmute.
Now I'm unmuted.
Ah, there we go.
It's been too long since I've been on a Zoom. Leonard just mentioned inclusiveness, and y'all were talking about where do these people come from, and we found that at our alumni chapter here, we ended up with people from other treatment centers. I was at a meeting one time, and a person was there first day back out of treatment, scared to death, not knowing what to do, and we welcome to our chapter. I mean, their experience was so similar to our experience. It was exactly the same, except it was a different treatment center. So we ended up with people from other treatment centers, and they benefited just the same, I believe.
Thanks, Mac. Who else?
Hi, Leonard. This is Karen.
Hi, Karen.
I'm the alumni program director over here at Cornerstone. And I love these TPAS meetings because right when I'm about to feel burnt out, I hear you guys speak and I'm like, yeah, because it is difficult because people want numbers, but it's not about numbers, right? It's about, like, you have to also be an advocate. So if you can't put, like, for example, So we have the alumni meetings, right? But then someone that just left treatment can, while they're with us in Cornerstone, I do point of contact where I try to get to know them from detox till they leave, so that I build that relationship, right? And now it's like people call because they want to get their chips from me, like, and it's like, now it's like, you get more personally engaged, and then you become an advocate, and then that's when you can actually put those numbers down and be like, hey, 5 people came just to hang out in my office today. And those people are going to be like the faces of Cornerstone or recovery or whatever. And that's when you can start taking the engagement and turning them into numbers. But in the beginning, yeah, it's a lot of groundwork. There's not a lot of ROI right up front. But then those alumni also refer 5 other people within 2 months. And it's just like a slow burn. But once it catches on fire, it catches on fire. Just thank you. And I love TPAS, and you guys have supported me through like some really hard times where I'm like, what am I doing? But it does work.
Well, Karen, that's a great thought, because I failed to mention it's all about relationships across the whole board, but the staff on site with the patients and getting to know them while they're there is critical. I did mention that because I had a really good staff that did that. I failed to acknowledge that, because my job was just flying around outside the center, right? So it's really great that you're doing that and building those relationships.
I do points of engagement. Like I try to meet them in detox at least once.
Yep.
And then when they go to like maybe whatever stage they go to, I go and I meet them there once. And then always I do like celebrations. If they're 30-day, I'll go and like give them a card and like acknowledge that. And then that's how I build my relationship with my alumni. And
That's
so by the
right.
time they leave, they're so familiar with me that they just come to me when they have anything,
That's right. That's right. And one more comment. People want numbers too. I mean, it's sad that treatment industry, the numbers of successful continuous recovery outside of treatment, it's challenging. But this is a solution. This is a solution for that. We, like with this big volunteer group, and not everybody's going to have that. We had like an 85% continuous recovery rate over 10 years. And, because we're a nonprofit philanthropy, there was probably about $3 million worth of philanthropy that came. It wasn't a whole lot of people, but a few people gave their time, their treasure, and their talent too. So these things do happen. Okay, who's next?
We got Stephanie.
Hi,
Hey
Stephanie.
guys, it's so great to see you. Nice to see you again, Leonard, and thanks to you and your volunteers for being here and sharing. I got so much information, so many notes. So my question's for you, but I guess for anybody here also, we've kind of toyed around from time to time with the idea of affinity groups. So LGBT alumni, African-American alumni groups, things like that. Do you know folks who are doing that or have had any success with that?
I don't know of that. The challenge I think could be is when you go to the density of an area. We're really inclusive of everything because if you start segmenting these off, you don't have the density. You might have 2 or 3 in this group and 2 or 3 in that group, or 3 or 4 in this group. But it's better in my opinion, to put them all together. So because if it's a very small group, it can fizzle out easier.
Totally.
Yeah,
I think I was thinking more of a
recognize-
Zoom sort of thing.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Good point, though.
I'm going to piggyback on that because we thought about doing some, like I explored that. And exactly what Leonard's saying is like, it starts to like become too divided where it doesn't feel cohesive. But you can have maybe special events if you do have a population that is strong at that point and they want to do something. You could host an event or do special meetings, but try not to divide the groups, because then it becomes like as Leonard said, like 2 here and 3 there.
Yeah, good point.
Great. We have Bonnie.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom and passion. My name is Bonnie, and I'm from the West Coast of Canada. I'm with Edgewood Health Network. And I've actually worked with Edgewood for 20 years, but we are really developing and becoming much larger of a network where we've got multiple locations, certainly all over the country. So my challenge is trying to bring our alumni together from several different organizations that fall under our network. Laura, I'd love to chat with you. We've got several alumni in the Calgary area, plus we've also opened a location there. So I'm just thrilled to be able to be part of this group, to sort of be re-energized again to hear what you guys have done successfully. We have a pretty good alumni program locally, but I'm really trying to find ways to expand and maybe merge, create these chapter groups. I've sort of been calling them alumni ambassadors in different locations, but it's very much in its infancy stage. So I just really appreciate, like I said, your knowledge and your passion. And Laura, if you are available, I would love to set a time up and kind of pick your brain about some opportunities in Calgary.
Yeah, you might want to put your numbers in the chat room or something to connect with one another, because yeah, you know, Laura's been on this for 20 years, and no doubt, you know, if you want to boost your program or help weave the tapestry, she'd be good at it. So
amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pam?
Yes, thanks so much. First of all, I just want to say amen and ditto to everything that was said, truly. But just a couple of quick thoughts. First of all, I totally agree with what we were talking about with the numbers. I mean, I'm a big believer, even working in nonprofits, that there's no mission without margin. So we've got to have some type of accountability to the bottom line. But as Leonard talked about before, those statistics do prove that it's the alums that are going to be building the bottom line anyway, and their referrals, indirect or direct. And the other thing that I was thinking that I just wanted to share is I was so fortunate to be part of TPAS in the beginning at Mac's house in Fort Worth in 2010, and it's because I was a brand new alumni director, first ever alumni director at the Farley Center at the time. And I'm no longer there, I don't do that, but it just, I feel such a sense of joy knowing that what we talked about that weekend, it has come to fruition in spades. And it's because of everything that we're talking about here. It's because of the relationship building. It's because of the doing the next right thing, trying, failing, succeeding, trying again. And it just, I love seeing that, which also reminds me that whether, I mean, again, I'm not an alumni director right now. I'm fortunate to serve on the board of TPAS, but we're just stewards of our work right now. So what we're doing now isn't, you know, even if we may not see the fruits of it, but those down the road will, and the alums that are benefiting from it will. And which reminds me of, you know, even the fundraising or the bottom line, planting the seeds is what's going to grow. Maybe not tomorrow, but it will grow if we continue to build those relationships. And we might even be passing on the baton where someone else sees the full potential of what these groups can do. But if we're doing the next right thing, I have full belief, no matter where you're located, it is going to grow. And I work in the recovery industry in a different role right now, but I apply the exact same principles, and the success has been phenomenal. You know, not because I'm so great or because we have the best spreadsheets, but because we meet and we build relationships and do everything that was already articulated today. So thank you for that. And thank you, Mac and Leonard, for having the vision to build TPAS, and for where TPAS has gone and where it's going in the future. And for all of you that are on this call, for sharing your best practices and your hearts, because that's what helps us grow. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Yes, I just want to add to that too, is, and I think I've said it before, but how we've designed TPAS is how we built the alumni community again, and it's all about relationships and connecting and all that. So, people say, well, what does CEO think? Well, we're trying to build a model that's unique and different, right? And that's what we've done so far. So anyway, any last comment? I think I'm going to have to move out of this room here in a minute or two.
I think Lynn had maybe a question or one more thing.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here. Lynn Beal, I'm a brand new TPAS member, and I'm also new with Monterey Behavioral Health, Director of Alumni Services. I've been there for 3 weeks, so I'm grateful to be amongst you all. I did run an alumni program prior, but everyone was local. So I'm learning a lot, just like kind of taking, because obviously we're not primary substance use. So I'm kind of taking pieces from Leonard and Lauren, everybody, what they're sharing, and seeing how I can put, like I've already started an online peer support group because there's people all over the country. So, and I was curious, and I know we don't have time, but I'm kind of doing grassroots, old school, reaching out, emails, texts, calls. I'd love to know what kind of platforms, when somebody earlier said, oh, I send out an email. Was that Darren? I don't know. What kind of platform do you guys use when you've got hundreds, if not thousands of alumni? So maybe that's for another talk, but thank you.
No, that's super helpful. I don't know if Darren, if you wanted to respond to that. Were you saying it was email?
No, I don't think I mentioned anything about email, but yeah.
I don't remember who it was.
I love that. Yeah, no, I think again, like a couple of people have said, that it's starting somewhere, right? So if it is that most of your database, and maybe Leonard can jump in here too, but most of your database is with phone numbers or with emails, that's where you start. And then that's how you continue to collect information. But I don't know if Leonard wants to kind of jump on that.
I'm sorry, I had to move location. So what was the question about database? What was the question?
Hey, Leonard, thank you. I was just mentioning that I'm new. I've been 3 weeks at Monterey Behavioral Health as alumni director. So I was asking about communication. I'm doing grassroots, old school. I'm pulling phone numbers, emails. I was wondering what kind of platform you guys use, if any, to like blast. Do you use Constant Contact? Do you just do old school call,
Well, we didn't have any kind of particular program, I don't think. It was pretty, this is 20 years ago. But we did old fashioned snail mail. Like if we go to San Francisco, there were probably 800 alumni there or something like that. And volunteers could do phone calls. We called 600 numbers in San Francisco 3 different times. And, we could just do that. I mean, not everybody has that luxury. And then we sent mail out and all that. And we did it on 3 different occasions over a year and a half as a test. And we had, I think, from the 25 year inception of Betty Ford to that time, we kept doing these different breakfasts, 3 breakfasts, doing mail, phone calls, and email. And we ended up with 15% of the entire alumni group, or of that population, that actually ended up coming to some event over time. So that was pretty good, I think. But you just do the best you can on that, because we had the luxury of a lot of manpower to do that.
Amazing. Well, again, I want to thank Leonard. I want to thank Laura. I want to thank Mac. I want to thank everyone for being on here this morning, for sharing such an amazing experience. I've put my phone number, my email, and then also the link if you have not registered for the in-person fall collaborative. Please feel free to reach out. And then, like I said, this is being recorded. So if you need to go back, rewatch, have any more follow-up questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And we look forward to talking and hearing from everyone. Again, I'm just really grateful that I got to spend my morning with you all. What an amazing experience. So make sure to all stay in touch with one another as well.
Yeah, and feel free to call me too. I talk to you, help out, or the CEOs or your compliance people, whoever. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Have a good day. Go TPAS.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.